Yeah, it was.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Any declarations of interest, members, on any item on the agenda under item 2? There being none, I'll move to confirmation of the minutes, and I'll confirm the ordinary minutes of the last meeting on 3rd of April. Second, Councillor Walker. And all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Declare that carried. There being no petitions, it takes us to public input. Now, members, I received a number of requests for public input. I'm mindful of the standing orders, and I'm also part of the standing orders, if I can remind you, limits the public input part of the meeting to a total of 30 minutes. And following recent public submissions in the public input part of the agenda, some members, and I think rightly, have just asked me a question or two about those time limits. I think 1 or 2 meetings of committees have run to over 2 hours of public input, which is clearly a breach of the standing order. So today I'm suggesting that councillors might want to pose one question at the outset, and if there's time for a second question, if we can go to that second question. Is that reasonable? Definitely. Good.
Yes, it is.
It's after. So what I'm suggesting is pose one question. If a number of other councillors have a single question as well, and then we get through that in the time limit, we can get back to the original questioner with a second question, because what's been happening is members have been saying they've been missing out on asking a question, and I think it's reasonable to give everybody an opportunity. Okay, we will, so I've had a number of requests, and due to the time limit, the statutory time limit, I've had to decline one, and that was allowing pets on public transport from my Oha Hutchings, because we had already reached the standing orders 30 minutes limit. They are our standing orders. So the first we will hear from is Victoria Carter and Ben Carter from the company City Hop, a car sharing company in Auckland. And I'll just run through the others first. Then we'll hear from Lindsay Mackey and Sean Park from the architectural firm Archimedia about the future vision for the Portland. We'll have jointly, I think, if possible, Anne Bately on...
Batley,
thank you.
Burton.
Having animals accompany people on public transport. Dr. Sarah Zito from the SPCA on the same subject, and Tony Miller as an individual, though she is also a local board member, on the same subject. So let's start with and welcome Victoria Carter and Ben Carter from City Hop. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you, councillors.
Welcome, Ben. We have 5 minutes, and I'm sure you've got a really snappy presentation for us.
Thank you.
To take us through your work.
Thank you, councillors. Well, 10 years ago, well, nearly 11 years ago, Helen Clark launched City Hop with 3 car parks. Today we have got nearly 80, and we will expect to be at about 150 by the year end.
Fantastic.
This is your car key. This card, once you become a member of City Hop, when you go online and is the overhead working? And go online or phone us or use your phone app. You can book a car from 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock or for however long you want it, and turn up at the car that's in a designated car park around the CBD, the City Fringe, Hobsonville, Birkenhead. When the car park disappeared, Auckland Transport asked us to put some cars there. You place this on the windscreen and the car doors unlock. It's really simple and really easy. Here we go. Oh, that's yours.
We can see it.
We've got a really nice presentation for you.
We can see it.
Great, thank you.
A lot of us who've got the computers on have got it.
Okay, thank you.
The international statistic is that every car share car removes close to 7 to 15 privately owned cars off the road. So we argue that we bring a public benefit by providing car share to the community. Our booking engine provides efficiencies. You might be able to see a picture of what our booking engine looks like day to day. It shows 5 people using 1 car within a 12-hour period. whereas that could have been 5 separate cars, whether that's a pool car or a personal car in that journey as well.
So people who join car share have been shown, we did some research with Auckland Transport, to walk and use public transport or bike 50% more than they did when the car keys were in the bowl by the front door. We've opened up about 1,500 kilometres of road space, and we've put back, according to Philip Boyle, who did some amazing research in Sydney on the value of car share, over 5
million.
5 million back into the community.
And that's through increasing land value space, reducing emissions, reducing congestion, bringing in curbside parking, reducing trauma, and bringing a local economic multiplier.
Victoria and Ben, we now have you live with your slides, so
Thank you.
if you need to go back over anything, just proceed.
We'll just flip straight to the
Yeah, if we could
benefits,
go to
I
the
think.
benefits of car share, the last slide of that. We've got a beautiful picture of O'Connell Street where it shows the difference between having car parks and when the car parks are removed. And our saying is that people spend money and not cars.
Next one.
Yay.
So our membership base is pretty much half business and half individuals. We've got a number of small, medium and very large businesses that now use us instead of owning a pool car, which means a much better use of resource. So instead of having pool cars sitting in a car park waiting for staff to drive to work and then get in the pool car to go to their meeting and then get back in their car and drive home again, we're replacing those pool cars with our cars, so then we're able to offer staff a guaranteed ride home, or staff can use that car to ride share. It gives people a lot more choices. You can also see on the map in your presentation, our membership is New Zealand-wide. It's not just people in Auckland. We do have cars in Wellington as well, but people from all over the country are now finding it easier to come to Auckland, and then when they need it, use a bus to get to town, and then when they need a car to get to Albany or go down to Manukau, they can then use a City Hop card.
It's part of the mode shift in getting people to use public transport, because now they can take a bus or a train, and just in case they need a car for an emergency, they have that option.
Good thinking.
Next slide.
Must be expensive.
Do it here. Just give me those. You may well have seen the Daisy. We've got 2 cars in the Daisy apartment. One of our cleaning staff turned up to clean the cars and discovered that our van was parked outside. Somebody was moving into the Daisy. We work with a lot of developers to put cars into development so that they don't need to provide so many car parks. It's another way, I think, of a win-win between a council and private enterprise, giving people more amenity. We've got a wide range of cars, from RAV4s to little eco-friendly Yaris's, Corollas, electric cars, a Nissan Leaf, and of course the van. Next one, you want to speak to this one?
We also work with lots of businesses to reduce their pool fleet. Our vehicles can be used after hours by their staff, so now the staff don't have to drive to work, pick up the pool car and drive their pool car around to return the pool car and take their personal car home again. It can be one car for both services, which reduces the amount of car parks taken and the amount of cars on the road. So we're working with the North Shore District Health Board at the North Shore Hospital. We've reduced 10 of their pool cars to 6 car share cars, and their staff can take them home after hours instead of those cars sitting there after hours and during weekends.
This is a really good example. It happens all over Auckland. We've got numerous business hubs where every different business has their own pool cars. And you can see here this example at Smales Farm and the business environs nearby. What we're proposing is that if they were to all think differently about whether they needed to own individual cars and whether they could actually share them, this would be the transformation. So you'd go from having 1,000 cars down to maybe 350, but you're getting better utilisation and you'll have fewer car parks, which are actually quite ugly. So I think we're done. We're trying to keep it really quick to our 5 minutes. I can talk about car share forever, some of you know that. But I'm very happy to take questions.
To summarise, you don't have to have one pool vehicle sitting outside in a car park all the time. You can choose whatever car is needed for that one specific journey and where's best for you at that one time. It's a lot easier than having this stagnant car park and carpool or pool car. Thanks for your time.
We've got some City Hop cards if anybody wants to give it a go. Auckland Transport use us.
Yes, please.
Great. Well, Ben can make sure that we give some to the chair so they can be distributed.
Thank you, Victoria and Ben. Discussions with Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, we've got a fleet that we'd like to reduce and make some savings on. Have you made an approach to us?
Yes, I've been talking to Auckland Council for 10 years about how we could reduce their fleet and get better utilisation of the car parks and better use of the asset. That's still a work in progress. As I said, Auckland Transport are regularly using us instead of as overflow for their cars, which is terrific. But yes, there are plenty of CCOs that might like to think about reducing their pool cars. The other opportunity, I think, for the planning committee is that every developer that comes to you could be asked the question, do they need to build 2 car parks with every development? And we've already seen some innovative examples of creative recognition that actually not every apartment does need to come with a car anymore.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, you've already asked my first question, Mr. Chair, and the second question is, have you seen any planning on the part of Auckland Transport for the provision of the space requirements for car sharing, particularly in CBD areas, but in the vicinity of plazas, shopping complexes and the like, public locations around Auckland?
Generally, we've done the planning for them of where we think car share will work best. We've got a lot of data on who's already a member of us and where the demand is, and so we normally go to them proposing a location.
So just cutting to it, is the answer no, but it needs to be done?
I think there's a real opportunity for some future proofing. So before, we are talking to them about park and ride, so the logical place to put car share for that last kilometre. But I think there's a lot more future proofing. Like I think there could be some visioning 5 and 10 years out about if we want to have a city where fewer people are driving, what does that look like?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you tell me potentially the cost savings for corporates that have fleets of approximately 800 cars? Which, of course, is what Auckland Council has.
The price of just the car park alone would cover the City Hop usage for a car for a year. We find that just on a car-by-car basis, it's in the thousands every year annually per car.
So, Mr. Chairman, I noted that the presenters said that they'd been trying to talk to us for a number of years, and I know standing orders preclude having a resolution following a public forum input. But what can we do about potentially asking City Hop to do a cost-benefit analysis for us around our own fleet?
Hey, look, prior to this presentation, when Victoria and Ben came to me wanting to present to the committee, we had a coffee together. And out of that, I have put them in contact with Rod Aitken from our Corporate Property Strategy Unit, something like that. And I think a meeting has been undertaken.
Right.
So you'll be aware, Councillor, we are looking at the fleet, and we are also looking at the car parking in buildings like 135, including our own car parking.
So I just want to know that's being
So
progressed.
I believe that work is underway. Victoria, can you update us on your discussions?
We had a great meeting with Rod and as somebody from the sustainability team, a fleet manager. Fleet managers don't like us, you have to recognise that, because they're afraid that we're going to take over their job. I think there's room for everybody.
Just appointed a new fleet
Victoria?
So I'm hoping that just like so many other businesses are now looking at alternative ways of managing their cars. Obviously we don't take over dedicated cars for the Ranger and so forth, but where there are pool cars, we know that we'll be far more efficient and save you money.
The progress has been made.
So just on that, Councillor Simpson, I think work is underway and we'll see further memos and possibly reports coming on fleet management and the reorganisation of car parking. And there's opportunity there for us to ask the officers those specific questions. You happy with that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper?
Just quickly, thank you very much. I just wondered, when Uber came to pass in Auckland, did that have any initial impact on your service?
Absolutely none at all. Our only competitor is people owning their own car and car park.
Yeah.
As public transport improves and mobility options improve, more people have with more options and choice. It becomes an easier alternative. Instead of, we know that taxi trips are sometimes more efficient than taking a car back and forth, and so it's sort of we help each other.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both, Victoria and Ben. An innovative business and very much appreciate. Councillor Simpson, you want to move?
Yes, I will, thank you.
Second.
Councillor Walker will second. And we've lost the words there. And they are before you now. All those in favour say
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Thank you all for
Contrary,
your
no.
time.
Declare that carried. Thank you both. We now welcome Lindsay Mackey and Sean Park from the architectural firm Archimedia, architects of our wonderful art gallery project of a few years ago.
And also Te Oro, Mr. Chair.
And
Te Oro.
Te Oro,
Kuru.
and
And
many others,
and our
I'm sure.
condolences.
Thank you. And they wish to present on their starting of a conversation to stimulate more interest in a post-port future.
Which future, Mr. Chair?
A post-port future.
So, no port.
You'll recall that the Port Future Study anticipated the relocation of the port.
Why won't this presentation?
Who would you like to start, Lindsay?
Sorry,
Or
could
short?
you make it full screen PDF?
Can we make it full screen?
Just so that it's inside view at the top.
Go to view. Yep, full screen. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Morena, good morning, everybody. I'm Lindsay Mackey. This is Sean Park from Archimedia. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to Council. We think Auckland deserves a really welcoming foreground to the city. That speaks not just about the pragmatics of maritime commerce, but also about aspirational values and our identity in a new age. Our people and their diversity, our place and the specifics of its location in the Southwest Pacific, and about future sustainability and our place in the natural world. We've prepared this master plan to stimulate a public debate about how best to use this land for the city. In the context of this forum, we have two recommendations. One, that the city, through a public collaborative process, creates an aspirational master plan for the site, and two, that nothing that the port company does in the next 30 years compromises that master plan. You'll have seen from the pack that you had with your agenda that we've consulted widely and integrated all relevant feedback into this proposal, resulting in about 20 key urban design principles and responses. I won't go through them all. I just simply wish to speak to a few key ideas. So the Ports of Auckland site, as you know, is a result of a century of reclamation from the Waitemata Harbour. The original shoreline is shown as the red line on this site plan of the existing port. The most significant gesture of this proposal is to return the land to the Waitemata, to the water realm, by encircling it with a tidal seawater channel and creating a new walkable urban island. In a cultural context, the island is seen as an atoll, which opens up ancient narratives for tangata whenua. The island closely resembles the footprint of the current reclamation, but it's re-expressed in an Auckland headlands and bays topography. We propose that the public realm, landscaped open space, takes precedence over the built environment on this island. The island's approximately 62.5 hectares. Of that area, we're proposing 40.5 hectares, or 65% of it is public open space. The island creates a multitude of new aquatic edges, totaling over 8 kilometres of new public walkable waterfront. A pedestrian walkway and a bike path encircles the entire island. The elevated seawalk mitigates the northwest fetch of the harbour and creates a sheltered lagoon and water stadium within for active recreation. The new ground plane of the island is adjusted to respond to a 2-metre sea level rise over the coming century. There's lots of facts and figures about this proposal, but I just want to mention 3 key ones. The new channel, estuary and reclamation, which are returned to the Waitemata, equal 5.6 hectares, and the proposed public space footprint is about 40.5 hectares, that's the 65%, and the proposed private development footprint is about 22 hectares, or 35%. We understand that a new cruise terminal is proposed for a redeveloped Captain Cook Wharf. Can you go back? This will involve almost doubling its current extension into the harbour. In conjunction with Prince's Wharf, this new terminal may cope with demand over the next 25 years or so. It may be by the time the port's redeveloped that demand for cruise liner berthing has grown beyond that capacity. We simply note that the existing Bledisloe Wharf significantly exceeds the length of the largest cruise ships currently visiting Auckland. That's the Oasis class ships. And we're proposing a new mixed-use terminal on the current Bledisloe Wharf. So yeah, are you going forward? We see the CBD defined by the ridges and gullies of the topography, so it's the next slide. And it's curtilage of harbour. The atoll extends into the Waitemata less than the existing port, so it softens the transition to the CBD. Just to get an idea of scale, the port development is 6 times the viaduct in size. It's twice Wynyard and it's half Docklands in Melbourne. And you can gauge the size of the lagoon compared with Viaduct Harbour in Judges Bay, and Akahu Bay and Mission Bay. We see the city from the water. Historically, the isthmus was approached from the ocean, so many visitors first see Auckland as they travel up the Rangitoto Channel. We believe the new island should be predominantly landscape and thus form a new green foreground to the city. Within this parkland, an ahi car beacon of fire is sited, a symbol of identity, of occupation, a navigational and territorial marker. I've said to you that there's 8 kilometres of new public walkway, waterfront walkway in this proposal. I know I'm short of time, so I'll just talk about the waterfront axis. The waterfront axis continues the waterfront spine established by the Council Waterfront Plan, including Quay Street within the CBD, the Viaduct and Wynyard Quarter beyond. We propose that Quay Street, east of Tinley Street, is restored to its original axis. Apart from the historical resonance, this reintroduces the long urban view shaft from Point Campbell to the ferry building and the new Te Wero Bridge urban markers. In our view, it's essential that Quay Street retains its integrity as Auckland's waterfront street, and it's not consigned to an inland role by overdevelopment of the Ports of Auckland land. A sort of byproduct of that idea is that the realignment of Quay Street also creates a larger footprint for the land between the Strand and Quay Street, which is sufficient to accommodate international best practice rectangular stadium. This would create a cluster of major entertainment venues within walking distance to the CBD and on the integrated rail network. To accommodate crowds accessing the new stadium, a pedestrian promenade is created to the south of Quay Street and a new rail station is proposed east of the Strand Bridge. New mixed-use buildings open onto this pedestrian boulevard and they establish a new constructed street boundary aligned with the stadium and forming an active urban edge parallel to Quay Street. The new stadium is shown located on Ngāti Whātua land, and there are a series of new development sites to the south of Quay Street which look across to the channel and the island. There's a lot of debate, I know, about the capacity and location of a national or local stadium accessible to the CBD. In our opinion, this large and often empty structure should not be located on the seaward side of Quay Street. We haven't investigated the design of the stadium other than to compare it, as you saw, with the footprints of Forsyth Bar, Trust Stadium Wellington and Suncorp Stadium Brisbane. We've used the footprint of Allianz Stadium in Turin, which is a 45,000 capacity stadium with a very good spectator experience, and we suggest that the roof may need to be closed for all sorts of reasons, but particularly acoustic containment. So just to close, we think the stadium could be used to transform this precinct. It's walkable from the city and from the island. It's on the future streetcar and current heavy rail network with a new station east of Strand Bridge, which also means that the southern and eastern line can directly access the new park and headland and cultural centre. But I think importantly, it may be an opportunity for Spark Arena and the stadium to work together and use the magnificent old Gummerun Ford railway station and its forecourt as perhaps the public front of house spaces for a new hotel, which is essential to those two big new entertainment venues.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sean. Lindsay and Sean, can you just give us a background how your company Archimedia worked this up? I understand you had an internship project, you seconded people to this. Just give us a snapshot of...
Yes, that's right. We taught at the University of Auckland School of Architecture a studio program for a few years in a row. The last one we did was on Deported with Chris Barton, which was on the Ports of Auckland land. Sean and I felt we had some unfinished business, so we simply workshopped this in our studio over the Christmas period. We had a couple of interns from the university, and we habitually worked with Bernard Macquarie, who's our sort of cultural guide, worked this up, and then we started consulting it. And we've consulted it quite widely, and every piece of relevant feedback that we've had, and there's been a lot of really great feedback, has been incorporated into the proposal.
Okay, and I gather it's to stimulate public discourse on the post-port future. It's not that you want your plan to be delivered.
That's exactly right. This is the idea of this, is just to get people talking about what could possibly happen, what's the best possible use for this land and for the city.
Okay, thank you. Member Henry.
Was there any thought given to, and I love the stadium idea, but is there any thought given to, within that precinct, an idea that's been floating around for years and years and years, of a Māori cultural centre?
Thank you, yes. That sort of motu that you see on the upper right, the northeast end of the diagram, looks like an island, but it is actually that cultural history centre. So it just has a green roof. We kind of have a little joke in the island that, in the studio, that maybe Auckland's iconic building is actually an island, a volcanic island. So underneath that, apparent island, that is the Maori Cultural History Centre, and it's surrounded by that estuary, which uncovers and covers back up with a Waka landing, and it's accessed by a whole series of bridges from the walkway.
And if you were Father Christmas and the port buggered off tomorrow, and you did all of that, what sort of costs are we looking at?
So we're working with Ryder Levitt Bucknell at the moment to try and get a realistic cost on this, but I can give you some context. In 2013, Beckers did an exercise on the port. Now, it was dramatically less scope than what's shown in this proposal, but at that time it was about 350 million, and as I say, this has got dramatically more scope. It has the canal, and it has the seawalk, and it has a boardwalk right around the edge of the island. So even if that price quadrupled, we think it would balance the value of the new private development land that's created. But the critical thing to understand is, even if that balanced, the city would still retain 40 hectares of public open space on top of that.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just from a planning perspective, are there any issues, particularly with the heights of the buildings with the volcanic view shafts?
We don't believe so, and we've deliberately kept the levels of the buildings really low. And so we've said, like, by the cruise terminal, that's seven or 8 stories there, comparable to the scale of the ship, and perhaps seen apartments across the road. But you can see there, the orange is kind of a ridge, and the yellow is a valley, and it goes down between 4 and 7 stories. And the only place at the moment we've got any real height is where the stadium itself creates a kind of shadow, a view shadow.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions, members? Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, thank you for your imagination and your vision on this. I think it's a great design. I think it's really stimulating, and I think that we can ultimately do something really exciting with our waterfront. Just looking at your design there, obviously, if we're to pay for the public open space, this sort of project's almost got to pay for itself because we don't have buckets of money. What are you imagining the residential, the retail, the commercial sectors would return in terms of leasehold value to cover the cost of what that project development might be?
Well, we've been working with Alan McMahon from Colliers, and he tells us that the completed value of the land, so not the buildings, of the land, would be upwards of 1.2 billion, and the completed the finished cost for the development of the private sector land would be about 5.5 billion. But the critical thing from our point of view is that the rates on the developed project we think would bring an annual revenue to the council of about $40 million per annum. But all these costs, everything, of course, needs to be investigated properly through a proper design process and a proper costing process. And of course, the biggest part of design on this island is engineering. It's engineering design.
Great. Well, thanks again for starting the debate and stimulating our imagination. I think it's a great first step.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Councillor Clow.
Yeah, no, wonderful vision. You've got no slide that juxtapose the existing port over that, your design, because you mentioned that it doesn't go out any further, but you don't have a slide that shows juxtaposed on top. Overlaid, yep.
Those two there, so that to that. So the northeast corner of the port, which is currently being filled in as we speak, we've taken away, and so that's where we say, so in the old photograph, of course, that isn't filled in, but if you look there this morning, there's a huge car ship right across that wharf at the front there. So we've given that piece of land back, but otherwise, the footprint, I know it's kind of confused by the beaches and things, but it's almost, we're trying to match the footprint so that there's no redundant cost, but there is, of course, the edge treatment, the beaches and the seawall, and that's part of the engineering issue. We're assuming that the current Ports of Auckland land and its seawall are sound, and I think that's an assumption you'd really want to test.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay and Sean. I've probably just got a question at this point. We really haven't canvassed that long future, members, and we haven't begun this journey to that long future. And that's what Sean and Lindsay are proposing, that we stimulate public discussion so that we don't shut ourselves out of that opportunity. So my question is to Director of Strategy, Mr. Quinn. At what stage do we as a council start formally discussing that long future to ensure that we don't make decisions that shut us out of the opportunities that are being presented here today?
I think, sorry, I think that, as you know, today we'll talk about the port master plan, which is around the 30-year window, because they need certainty to operate, and the movement of the port under any scheme will be a long-term move. So I think that covers giving them the certainty to invest, to make sure they make the best of their business over that time. The second piece that we know is underway is the government's work on the logistics supply chain, which we envisaged is to be part of the next steps of the future ports study. And so we're waiting how that then rolls. I think the timeliness for that is once it's clear what the outcomes of that are, and as we've always said from the Future Ports study on, the key issue is less about this bit of land, it's more where does it reside if it's not there? And I think the key piece is, I think most of us can see there's terrific opportunity with this land if it was empty. However, what Auckland need to work through, as the Mayor has raised with us, is where is the location truly going to be, and then truly what are the costs of that move. And I think once we've got that, the debate on how this is used will be a pivotal part of the build-up of that, because if the decision is made to move it, then the complete business case will be as much about the cost to move as what can be realised on that site. So to me the order is those things. There's nothing wrong at all, of course, with the debate being had in terms of having a clear view of how it might look.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lindsay and Sean. It's extremely stimulating, and that was the idea of your work when you enrolled your interns, and it's a much-needed conversation. Thanks for beginning that much-needed conversation. Mayor Goff, would you like to move?
Yep, I'd like to move accordingly. The resolution that's there, complete with the description of it being an inspiring idea, which I believe it is.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. We will now move to the next part of our agenda in the public forum. Oh. Now, I was going to propose, if it's okay with Anne Batley, Dr. Sarah Zito and Tony Miller, would you all like to come up? And if you've got species that don't like each other, maybe one could sit at one end and one the other.
Now we know what that's about, eh, Phil? we know what that's like. That's why
I don't know what you mean,
opposition in government.
Is that why you're over there?
Can't teach old dogs.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. I was just waiting for that.
We got him surrounded.
Yeah. He's a hooker.
Let them go on the public.
Right, and we've also got Case, who is Councillor Casey's partner. Welcome, Case.
Your dog,
Keith.
Cassie.
Keith's got it right.
Susie. We hear all about these
Well,
dogs.
yeah.
They're alive now.
Distracted by the dogs, and I'll have to herd the cats.
This is going well.
Oh, look at it.
Tony, and welcome,
Yeah, I didn't
and Dr. Sarah Zito, welcome, and Anne Batley, welcome. I think I might start on my left with you, Dr. Zito. Would you like to introduce?
Oh, it's a cat in the cage.
So we'll go. How about we go through the presentations, members, and then we'll ask questions. Dr. Zito.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here today. So currently people in Auckland with companion animals have no option but to use a private car or taxi if the animal needs to be transported somewhere. The SPCA is here today to support the motion to allow companion animals to be carried on all modes of public transport around Auckland, as we feel that this could have numerous benefits for both people and animals.
Looking for his mum. His mum. His mum.
Okay, sorry, it's not working very well. So it's important that people are not restricted in their ability to transport their animals to the vet if this is necessary. And currently the necessity of having to use a private car or taxi can make this impossible for some families to do that, or it may impose quite a costly burden on some families in addition to whatever they're going to have to pay for their animal to go to the vet. And in some cases this may even prevent the animal getting the veterinary treatment that he or she needs. Access to exercise areas is particularly important for people with dogs, and safe and enjoyable exercise areas may not always be available within a safe walking distance of someone's home. Allowing companion animals to travel on public transport with their guardian can allow them to access those exercise areas without the need for a car, and this should help to increase the amount of exercise that both people and dogs can enjoy, and so improve their health and welfare. Now, leaving animals at home for long periods alone can really have quite a negative effect on their welfare. And if animals can accompany their guardians on public transport, it's more likely that the animals will get to spend more time outside of the home with their people and not be left at home on their own as much. So transport and health research constantly stresses the need to reduce reliance on the public car, or the private car I should say, and car reliance may have negative health outcomes by diluting the health benefits that are associated with having a companion animal, particularly a dog. And it's important to encourage people to have and exercise with dogs, as there are many proven health benefits for humans and for their well-being. In addition to this, dogs can generate broader social sustainability, and this has benefits not only for individual people with dogs, but also the wider community. Allowing dogs on public transport can help achieve these benefits, because transport has been identified as being a critical enabler of individual health and social benefits associated with having a dog. It's also important that it's as easy as possible for people to spend more time with their animals and include them in their everyday activities. This helps to develop, nurture and maintain the strong and important bond that people have with their animals, and obviously also contributes to the enjoyment of life for those animals because they are interacting with their people. So reducing the use of cars and increasing the use of public transport is obviously beneficial for many reasons, but there is evidence for a high level of car dependency for trips that are related to transporting animals. And there's even documented evidence that the need to have a car for people to take their animal to the vet or to be transported for another reason is a factor in the decision to buy a car for some people. Allowing pets on public transport has the potential to discourage car trips that are related to the transport of animals, and it may help to normalise public transport use in car-dependent cities. So the main concerns that people express about allowing animals on public transport include issues related to hygiene, safety and nuisance. But we believe that all of these concerns can be well managed by responsible animal guardians. Guidelines to help achieve this could include making sure that cats and other small animals are carried inside a suitable animal carrier, such as modelled by our friend here, and making sure that dogs are on a leash and under control at all times, as modelled by our other two canine companions here. And the other thing that could be quite helpful is just to make sure that the person in charge of the animal knows that they have a responsibility for cleaning up any mess that is caused immediately, and they should always be carrying whatever items are necessary to do that. So just in conclusion, the SPCA does support the move to allow suitably controlled or contained animals on public transport, as we feel that it really could have significant benefits for animal welfare and health, human well-being, and that any concerns can be easily managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zito. Appreciate that. And Anne Batley?
Yes, do I need this, or can you hear me from this?
Yes,
Good.
if you can speak into the microphone.
Great, thanks. I'd like to fully endorse what Dr. Sarah has already said, of course, in her most expert phrases, but I would like to endorse everything in my own way. I'm from the New Zealand Cat Foundation, and in particular I'm talking about cats, but of course fully aware of it's probably more necessary for dogs to be taken around on public transport. It's very easy, as you can see, to transport a cat in a little cage like this, and they can't do much damage to anybody. As many of you may be aware, I am a strong advocate for animals in general, and I believe that it's not only in the public's interest that companion animals be allowed on public transport, but also of major benefit to our animals, which play an integral part in our community. It's only logical, considering authorities in general, whether they be governmental or councils, are actively encouraging the use of public transport in an effort to reduce road congestions. So it's clear that people must be able to take their pets on public transport. Many people take their pets to work on a daily basis, or they may simply need to take them to a vet for treatment or for a run in the park and visiting friends. Animals are part of our families, and this needs to be accepted by councils and government. Since in the future there'll be many more people living in the inner city who often don't have a car and who may not have access to private transport, The inability to utilise public transport with their pets would be prohibitive to them living a full and normal life, and it would also cause a reduction in animal welfare. We have enough instances as it is of people not taking good enough care of their pets. Dogs in particular desperately need companionship and exercise, and to be able to take them on public transport would help facilitate this, quite apart from the importance of regular vet visits. Councils have already brought in so many regulations regarding companion animals which put people off owning one, either because it's too expensive or just too hard under their circumstances. So it's important that public transport can accommodate them. We also have people on lower incomes, as well as the elderly who may not drive or simply can't afford to pay for a taxi to get their animal to the vet or elsewhere, and this could lead to animal welfare neglect and cruelty. I also believe that they should not have to be caged in the case of dogs unless they are small and the owner prefers that option. For larger dogs it isn't practical, and as long as the dog is well behaved and there's a separate area for people with animals, this should not pose a problem. Much money is being made through registration of animals. Surely some of it can be used for their benefit. A special carriage in the train or a section of certain buses. This would reduce issues with those in the community who are not animal friendly. With regard to any issues of perceived danger to the public, there could either be a special pet or perhaps, special area, or perhaps they should have a behavioural check prior to being allowed on public transport, or if in doubt, a muzzle could be worn. As far as allergies are concerned, many people are saying, oh, they're allergic to fur and things like that. We spend a lot of time in Europe where animals are very welcome everywhere, and particularly in restaurants. I haven't heard of anyone having anaphylactic seizures or serious allergy issues, but if anyone does have problems such as this, I don't imagine they'd be using public transport in the first place, and assuming they are aware of their health issues, it's really their responsibility to look after themselves. Perhaps masks could be available. This is pretty common in certain Asian countries when using public transport. However, I don't believe we should all be held to ransom because of a small minority of people who have these allergy problems. To finish, I strongly believe, given the pressure being put on the community to make better use of public transport, it is imperative that companion animals are allowed to use it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Tony, welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. Tony Miller, member of the Arake Local Board, past Auckland City Councillor, past person who sat on dog hearings, and also those for dogs that have misbehaved, the hearings for them. As you can see, I am a dog owner, very much so. I have a rescue dog here, Toby, who's not liking this environment. Also was very aware there's a cat next door to him, but still under control. I'm a certified responsible dog owner, and I believe that dogs and cats, if under control, and I mean, maybe you make it that you've got to have them wear diapers or whatever, which is what I've seen overseas as well, if the dogs are walking on a bus. For Toby, he is much better like this. Well, he's equally as good in his cage. But for me to walk onto a bus, that's a heck of a thing to carry. And I would personally prefer to have him in this, which means he's totally contained. He's not going to lift any legs, as he's a male. He's a rescue dog from Silverdale Rescue Centre. He'd been left in an apartment and then thrown out on the street by the owner for months. So he's had his own issues, and he just likes to be with me. He goes to most of my meetings and sits in the car. So it would be lovely to have us able to go for walks and then catch public transport home. And I believe that's absolutely doable, and New Zealand should be operating in that way. And I urge you all to support this notice of motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Members, do you have questions of the presenters? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Thanks for coming along. I just had a question for you, Doctor, around anxiety for animals in crowded spaces. That was my concern, because we very easily anthropomorphise animals and think that they've got human characteristics. But what worries me is if they were very stressed by, it's very hard for the owner to control sometimes a really busy bus or train. What's your view around that?
Well, I do think that there will be some animals that are probably not suited to be transported on in public transport or go to crowded public areas, but I suppose to a certain degree we have to trust that the responsible owners involved will know their animals well enough to not put them in situations that would be compromising their welfare and potentially the safety of people around them. I mean, we already trust that owners are going to do that in the general community, and I don't really see that it's very different to trust them to do that on a bus or a train when we trust them to do it on a ferry, or we trust them to do it in, you know, normal public places.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, members? There being none, I will put up the motion of there is Councillor Hills.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea, but my concerns are, what are your views on who would manage it? Would it be the driver? Like, say this morning on my bus, it's standing room only, and even in off-peak sometimes you could leave here at 9:30 and it still be people standing in the aisles. How do you see that working with the animals and the people? And would you expect that to be up to the bus driver to say, no, you can't?
Well, I think there'd probably need to be a conversation had about how that kind of situation would be managed. There could either be a situation where the bus driver or Auckland City Council or Auckland transport workers were the ones to make a final call on whether an animal could take a place on the bus or the train, or maybe there would be certain times of the day when you couldn't travel with an animal, you know, during, you know, real peak hours. But I don't think those are insurmountable problems. It's just a conversation that needs to be had in a sensible manner and some decisions made. And I think most pet owners would be quite happy to go along with a decision made on that if they knew that it was going to let them travel on public transport with their animal the rest of the time.
And say,
I believe in Wellington it's between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m, so you're avoiding the main commuter hours to avoid such problems.
And would you expect or accept a charge as well? So if you were taking up a seat, or if there was a dog peed in the bus or something, like, would there be?
I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, I think most places where they allow pets on public transport, they don't charge for them, but I think that, you know, potentially, well, I wouldn't mind paying for my dog or cat it's still cheaper than having to get a taxi or something like that if it's a reasonable cost.
I personally wouldn't mind if I was going to be travelling on public transport, which I don't intend to very often. But I'd rather take the taxi with the cat, I think. But generally speaking, I don't think people would mind. But then again, when you go on a plane, if you've got a baby with you, usually the baby isn't charged for. So, you know, the pet's not much bigger than a baby in most cases.
Charge babies.
Thank you.
I do know that on the Waiheke ferry, Toby pays $5.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've got to get ready for the 21st century. In Europe, these dogs, cats, whatever, they walk freely, they're not even in cages. There's no problems with them. I think it's about time we got with it and allowed the animals to do the same thing.
Thank you, Sir John.
Yeah,
Sir John, would you like to move receipt of the public input?
Yep.
Second.
And seconded, Councillor Casey.
And dog.
And the dog. Okay.
Susie.
Thank you all.
There's a name.
Tony and Dr. Zito, appreciate your presentations here today. It's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary no. Declare that carried. And we'll come to the notice of motion very shortly. Thank you all.